I'd like to call to order, and we'll start off with roll call. Can we start off with Ken?
Ken?
Paul Spieler,
Vince Wood.
John Maloney.
Andrew Stuffler, Secretary.
we will now open for public comment for anyone wishing to speak on items not on this agenda. Please note, due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. So the first person I have up is Bruce Caron. Okay, yeah, that's, okay. So, I'm sorry, I was a little premature. So anyways, anybody that would like to speak on anything that's not on the agenda today? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. We will now close the public comment and move on to the approval of the minutes for the Building Fire Board of Appeals meeting on August 2nd, 2018. Are there any comments from the board? All right, we need a motion from the board to approve.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
John Maloney, I'll second the motion.
All right, call to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Are there any announcements from the board? Okay, well, I have an announcement. This has to do with a meeting that we had last week on Chino Street, and I would like to ask the board to revisit the merits of the Chino Street appeal that we reviewed during our last meeting.
Mr. Chair, you said last week, but I think you meant last month.
Oh, last month. I'm sorry. Yes, last month. This appeal was regarding a driveway paving and site wall footings that were being constructed without a permit. And the board voted not to extend this item to our next meeting since the applicant was not able to attend. However, I at least later felt that I voted in haste due to the numerous number of items on the agenda and the time constraints that we had. And before I make a motion, I would like to open this for discussion to the board if there are any questions. All right, I would like to put in a motion forward that we offer the applicant of the 1209 to 1211 Chino Street appeal to present his appeal at our next Board of Appeals meeting. Any discussion from the board? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Mr. Chair, you need a second on that, just formally, so.
May I have a
John Maloney,
second?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Mr. Chair, we will put that item on the agenda for the October meeting.
Okay, thank you. Right now we have our first subject item, and that is 417 Samarkand Drive. And it's an appeal of a building permit issuance. And I have some speakers, excuse me, the staff. Could you please present and advise of the standing motion?
Mr. Chair, Lonnie Cassidy, our Plan Check Inspection Supervisor, is going to brief the board on the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. What you have before you is the appeal for the approval of a building permit application for the construction of a detached 600 square foot accessory dwelling unit. This was reviewed by all city required departments under the provisions of the state law that was passed for accessory dwelling units. The building plan check was actually performed by our outside consulting plan check firm, Bureau Veritas. The applicant addressed all corrections through that process, and the permit was was approved to be issued and issued. We subsequently received a appeal for this approval based on a provision in the California Plumbing Code for roof drainage. We do still stand by our approval. And we do have the design professional that was responsible for designing the project and the subsequent drainage available here if there are any questions.
Okay, great. Now with the applicant, please present your request.
brought supporting documentation. This is a copy of the presentation I'm giving today, just in case you prefer to see it up close and personal.
If you could speak into the microphone,
I'm sorry.
just tilt it up so it catches your voice.
This is a hard copy of the presentation you're viewing today. Is there anybody that doesn't have a copy?
I'm good at looking
I
at it.
passed mine down.
Also, there was a more detailed report that was provided earlier. I have copies of that.
I think we do too. Is that this one here? We already have?
Yeah, we got one.
There were a couple different versions of it, so
Sure. Thank you. Yes, and sticker.
and finally, I'll talk about this at the very end. Just sort of gives you a feel for the neighborhood.
May I have one of those copies?
Which one?
The last document.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. I'm just giving it to Greta so we have it for the record. Thank you.
This is quite long. Okay. My name is Mary Auchincloss Delbonis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I live at 3054 Hermosa Road. My property adjoins 417 Samarkand Drive, the property that is being developed, along the entire 60 feet of the rear property line. I'm here to appeal the proposed plan for the new building at the rear property line of 417 Samarkand Drive because the proposed plan is in violation of the 2016 California Plumbing Code. Title 24, Part 5, Section 1101.2. I learned of this code section through discussions with Lonnie Cassidy.
I'm going to read, could you read a little bit slower?
Oh,
Because I'm trying to follow you, so.
I'm sorry.
That's all
Would
right.
it be helpful if I faced you?
No, just into the mic, but just a little bit slower. People read faster, so if you're going to read something, I'll be able to make it clear if you just.
Okay, my apologies. Because the proposed plan is in violation of the 2016 California Plumbing Code, Title 24, Part 5, Section 1101.2. I learned of this code section through discussions with Lonnie Cassidy, who's here today. She's a plan check supervisor and a building inspector for the city of Santa Barbara. When Lonnie became aware of my concerns in late May, she sat down with me to go over the building plans for the new building at 417 Samarkand Drive. And she listened to my concerns and the history of drainage problems that we've had, and my concerns about the significant increase in drainage issues that would exist if the building plans proceed as in their current form. And she was the person that provided the applicable code section and gave me guidance on how to file this appeal. Thank you. Now let's see if I can do this. Uh-oh. Okay. I'd like to read an excerpt from Section 1101.2, unless that would be redundant for everybody. This section of the Plumbing Code requires roofs, paved areas, yards, courts, courtyards, vent shafts, light wells, or similar areas having rainwater shall be drained into a separate storm sewer system or into a combined sewer system where a separate storm sewer system is not available, or to some other place of disposal satisfactory to the authority having jurisdiction. In the case of one and two family dwellings, stormwater shall be permitted to be discharged on flat areas, such as streets or lawns, so long as stormwater shall flow away from the building, and most importantly to me and to my family, away from adjoining property, and shall not create a nuisance. The proposed building plan for 417 Samarkand Drive will increase impervious surface on the project site and cause significant concentration of existing surface drainage onto our property on Hermosa Road, which borders the entire 60 feet length of the rear property line of 417 Samarkand. These changes in drainage are not adequately addressed by the proposed plans and will result in serious adverse impacts to my property and to my family. These adverse impacts create a nuisance and result in violation of the 2016 Plumbing Code Section 1101.2. Throughout this report, you will find references to county, city, or other third-party resources to support facts and analysis presented. The issue of inadequate stormwater management for the proposed new building is critically important to me and to my family. The 9,000 square foot Samarkand property sits on a 6% slope, this is per city records, with grade D soil, and drains onto my property on Hermosa. It might be helpful to take a look at the little map right now, and you'll be able to see that the Samarkand Drive property is property 2, and my property, the Hermosa property, is property 18. So you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about drainage. Over the last 26 years, this drainage has caused significant flooding issues and property damage. Over the years, we have taken steps to manage these drainage issues, including installation of French drains, trenches, catch basins, and pumps, and our latest addition to our toolbox is a Honda generator. However, the plan to build a new unit along 24 feet of our property line delivers additional and concentrated stormwater drainage in a way that will significantly aggravate drainage and flooding issues. These additional drainage and flooding issues will be overwhelming to us. Here you see 2 pictures. The following illustration uses a map depiction of the Samarkand neighborhood available from the Santa Barbara Flood Control District. It is a topographic map. The lines show contour elevations for the area. Picture A shows the current drainage from 417 Samarkand Drive onto Hermosa property. Note the sheeting action of the red arrows across the 60 feet of the property line. Picture B shows how this drainage would change with the new building. The increase in impervious surface from the new building and deck will increase water drainage, and the placement of the new building along the current drainage area results in a significant concentration of existing drainage. This increase in volume and concentration of drainage will be directed at the foundation of our home. You can see our property right below the red arrows, and you can see how the change in the drainage goes from across the 60 feet to a much smaller area. So not only do we have the increase in drainage from the roof and the deck, but we also have a concentration of drainage pointed directly at the foundation of our home. We have a raised foundation, we have a basement. I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. During our first major flood in 1995, FEMA provided financial assistance to replace and repair damaged property. FEMA walked the property with us and explained that the neighborhood was originally developed in the 30s with a plan that stormwater would drain in a sheeting fashion across properties to the neighborhood below. FEMA explained that property owners have since developed their properties by adding buildings and other structures that significantly changed the intended drainage plan so that it is no longer working. Additional buildings, such as the building permit being appealed here, further aggravate drainage issues, making them increasingly unmanageable. That's scenario B. Okay. One of the comments people say, and it's a common view, is that California is a desert and is in a constant state of drought, but historical storm events have delivered devastating amounts of rain during both short and extended periods of time, causing moderate to severe flooding and property damage. The information for the chart that you see before you was taken from the Santa Barbara website. As you look through this, know that many of the significant rainfall events shown here resulted in flooding and damage to our property. If you would like, and if time permits, at the end of this presentation, I can describe details of what those flooding events are like. I can describe to you details of our preparation for storms, including scheduled wake-up calls during the night to check our property for flooding, and if necessary, dig additional trenches, activate or fix pumps, and secure sandbags. Rain for me years ago was exciting, but I always felt safe and cozy in my home. Rain for me now is an exercise in preparation, caution, and in many cases, fear. Okay, facts. The permit being appealed shows plans for a new 600 square foot building with an 813 square foot roof and a 210 square foot deck to be constructed at 417 Samarkand Drive along the property line adjoining my property on Hermosa. This is the drainage area that I showed to you in the earlier slide 4. The Samarkand property is on a 6% slope. That's per city records, and is 60 feet wide and 150 feet long with hydrologic soil group of MEC type D, which is defined as soils having the slowest infiltration rate and the highest runoff potential. The property under development has a long history of significant water runoff to our house on Hermosa and has caused multiple floods and property damage over the last 26 years. In order to translate our historical experience with flooding and the damage that results, I engaged Dale Weber. Dale is a registered civil engineer and the VP of Mac Design Associates. He has over 25 years of design and construction experience. His experience includes work as the county land development engineer and a member of the county subdivision development review committee. Dale is registered as a quality stormwater pollution prevention plan developer and practitioner. Analysis regarding stormwater runoff and drainage provided here is supported by calculations performed by Dale. The water drainage plan provided for the new building is not adequate to manage the storm water drainage that will result from the project. The project will result in damage to my Hermosa property by failing to adequately manage, 1, the incremental drainage resulting from the new impervious surface on site, and 2, by concentrating existing surface flows from the project site and directing them towards my residence, specifically to the foundation of my home. This is a calculation of additional drainage from the new roof and deck. This analysis was performed by Dale Weber using a computer-aided design program called HydroCAD. He cannot be here today, so I will explain about HydroCAD. HydroCAD uses procedures developed by the Natural Resources Conservation Service and is commonly used to generate runoff hydrographs to verify the adequacy of drainage systems or to predict where flooding or erosion problems are likely to occur. The inputs into the HydroCAD software include size of the project site, broken down by CN type, slope, soil type, and rain events per the County of Santa Barbara. The CN, I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to explain what's in the analysis. Yeah, yes. The CN, or curve number, is used to determine the portion of precipitation depth that will appear as runoff. It is a function of soil type and ground cover. HydroCAD software includes a complete curve number lookup table in its program that shows standard CN numbers for various surfaces and soil types. The 24-hour period used in this calculation is a standard measure common for this kind of analysis, as is the 25-year rain event. Dale used the Santa Barbara Urban Hydrograph method in his calculation. This method was developed by the Santa Barbara County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. The analysis shows that in a 25-year storm event, the new building and deck will bring an additional new stormwater drainage to our property equal to 543 cubic feet in the first 24-hour period. I just said that. Okay. This slide shows a calculation of the concentration of existing water drainage resulting from the new development. This analysis was also performed by Dale using HydroCAD. It shows that in a 25-year storm event, historical stormwater drainage from Samarkand to Hermosa prior to the new development in its existing state is equal to 3,654 cubic feet in the first 24-hour period. Historically, the total property drainage has occurred in a sheeting fashion across the 60-foot width of the property line. Would you like me to refer back to illustration A? No, okay. The addition of the new building and deck reduces the sheeting action of the drainage from across 60 feet to just 36 feet. The resulting 40% reduction in drainage space creates an increase in water flows to a concentrated area draining directly at the foundation of our home, equal to 1,462 cubic feet. I'd like to discuss an analysis of the proposed drainage plan per the plans. The plan shows the addition of a 12-foot by 12-foot by 8-inch deep rain garden in front of the proposed new building. I think I might have included that in illustration B. Let's see. That the property owners plan to handle stormwater flows from a portion of the new roof. The plan cites analysis from Stormwater BMP Guidance Manual Chapter 5 as support for the use of the rain garden to mitigate risk of stormwater drainage problems. However, Section 3 of that same manual indicates that rain gardens are only appropriate for hydrologic soil groups A and B. The Samarkand area is hydrologic soil group D. Soil group D is defined as a soil group with the slowest infiltration rate and the highest potential for runoff of all 4 soil groups. The guidance does not consider rain gardens appropriate to mitigate stormwater runoff from soil group D areas like the Samarkand neighborhood we live in. Drainage of the gutters from the proposed new building to this rain garden is planned to take place underground. However, the rain garden is located on ground that is higher than the new building. The plans show no details of how rainwater from the gutter system would be pumped to the rain garden. As such, it's improbable that any of the water from the roof will reach that rain garden. Calculated stormwater capacity for this rain garden based upon soil group D would be approximately 67 cubic feet. However, since the building plans show no practical method for the stormwater from the roof to reach the higher elevated rain garden, the capacity for handling runoff for the roof is 0. The current plans include an addition of a 12-foot by 12-foot rain basin that would be 8 inches at its deepest. It is planned that a portion of the stormwater from the roof would drain to this basin. Calculated stormwater capacity for the drainage basin is only 22.4 cubic feet, which is insufficient to reduce risk associated with runoff from the new roof and deck, and most certainly is insufficient to mitigate the risk of the increase in concentration of water flows from the existing rain. In summary, the proposed stormwater drainage plan for the new building at 417 Samarkand Drive will be inadequate to handle expected incremental stormwater drainage for a 24-hour period during a 25-year storm event. As a result of this inadequate stormwater drainage plan, we expect to be harmed from a significant increase in concentration of stormwater drainage onto our property. The proposed plan will result in a nuisance to us in violation of the 2016 California Plumbing Code, Section 1101.2. The table here shows a summary analysis of the inadequacies of the proposed drainage plan, including insufficient capacity for a 24-hour, 25-year rain event equal to 1,983 cubic feet. This analysis does not include the impact of a multi-day rain event, as occurred during El Nino. That, of course, would be much more severe impact than what you see here. We request that you repeal. We request that you repeal the issuance of permit BLD 2018-00018. If the applicant wishes to submit modified plans, please require that the following be included as part of any revised application for 417 Samarkand Drive. A detailed plan for stormwater management systems that effectively manage the additional stormwater drainage resulting from new impervious surface on site, considering the size, slope, and soil type D of the property at 417 Samarkand Drive. And prevent any increase in the concentration of existing sheet flow from 417 Samarkand Drive, whether due to new structure development, changes in grading and slope, or for any other reason related to the new development. Finally, we ask that you direct city staff to allow me and my engineer at least 30 days to review and comment on the modified plans prior to approval. Okay. I promised you some support for some of my talking points. The following slides provide support for some of the analysis in this report. The first slide is an excerpt from Stormwater BMP Guidance Manual stipulating that rain gardens are appropriate for soil types A and B. The second slide shows the hydrologic soil group for our neighborhood per the National Resources Conservation Service. The soil type is MEC. On the next slide, you will see that MEC is rated D. On the final slide, you will see that the Group D rating indicates the soil has a very slow infiltration rate and highest runoff potential of the 4 soil types in our area. Finally, I'd like to get to this little extra handout I gave that shows a depiction of our neighborhood. In my view, it's extremely helpful to see the layout of the neighborhood and to understand the slopes of the properties involved and the history of the development. The next picture is just a Google Earth depiction of the corner of Hermosa Road and Samarkand Drive. The 417 property is on the far left. The 3054 property is below the house on the corner on the far right. My purpose in showing you this is to show you the slope of Hermosa Road from the neighborhood, so you could just get a visual of what's happening. The next picture, same Google Earth, but a little bit more of Samarkand Drive. My purpose in showing you this picture is so that you can also see that as Samarkand Drive progresses towards Hermosa, there is an additional slope there. The next picture is a picture of the 417 Samarkand Drive property from my backyard. My purpose in showing you this is so that you could see the property, confirm just via visual that there's a significant slope there. The next picture is the basement. This is one of our many points of pain. There have been several events where this basement has been filled all the way up to the floorboards. We have a raised foundation, and we have had water up to the floorboards throughout the house. And we have had a pond or a lake in our backyard and on our driveway where water is captured. And the final picture is our backyard right now. What you see in the background is the hedge that separates our property from the property at 417 Samarkand Drive. The new building is to take up 40% of this property line from the right side of the picture, which clearly points new water flows that are not managed properly, and additional concentrated water flows from the building being residing 40% of the current drainage area directly at our property, which you see the little house here. I am hopeful that you will consider the seriousness of this issue to me and to my family, that you will consider protecting us against problems greater than what we are already dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open to public comment. Due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the board on this item? And I have some slips here, and the first one I have is Bruce Karen.
Would you like me to lead?
Yeah, you can, we'll call you back up if we need to ask any more questions. Thank you. Sure, yes. Patrick Mark can go first.
Hi, my name is Patrick Marr. I'm the architect and civil engineer for this project. And my area of civil involvement was mainly structural engineering. When I first got involved in this project, I spoke with counter staff about this specific issue because I've been involved in other projects where site drainage has been an issue, or of concern. And I was told that as long as we conform to the city's stormwater management practices guideline book, that we would be okay. And so that was the approach I took, that we conform to the requirements within the stormwater management book. We oversized the infiltration areas so that they're about 170% of what was the minimum requirement. We did a infiltration test where the city has you dig a hole a certain depth, you fill it up with 6 inches excuse me, of water, and you calculate, or you time how long it takes to drain, and supposedly if it drains in less than 24 hours, you're okay. Ours drained in 15 minutes. So there's some capacity, especially obviously during a drought time, there's some capacity within the existing ground to absorb water. It's not just going to totally sheet flow when the water's slowed down like we're intending with these infiltration basins. The soils report that she had, or she didn't have a soils report for this specific project. We do, and the terminology between what's in the city's guidelines and what's in our soils report is slightly different because they're looking at a different aspect of the soil. But it's basically silt and clayey sand for the most part on our site, and it's not very consolidated, so it has a lot of excess voids within it that can absorb additional water. When we located our infiltration areas, we located one uphill of the addition to try and handle as much water as far away, or infiltrate it as far away from the neighbor's property as possible. The other one we located slightly off to the side, and with its excess capacity, we're trying to capture excess sheet flow on the site.
Excuse me, Patrick, could you speak into the microphone just a little, or move the microphone a little closer?
sure.
To you? We're recording this. Thank you.
You, I don't know if there's a, could you locate that roughly on the, one of these plans?
Our two infiltration areas are basically similar to, these are the test pits that were dug during the geotechnical
But
investigation.
just to get everyone oriented, where's Hermosillo?
Hermosillo's over here,
Okay.
Samarkand is up
All right.
here, this is our
Okay.
property here,
Okay.
and the neighbor's property is back
Yes.
here, and the sheet flow is that direction. So we located one up here to handle the bulk of the roof water, get it as far away from the neighbor's property as possible. The other one we located off to the side to try and capture additional sheet flow, on site. When we originally located the building, you're considering a lot of different things when you do a project. And one of the big things we were trying to do was tuck the building into the corner of the property away from the neighbor's house as far as possible. We put the public areas of our building away from her property to, enhance her privacy and whatnot. And this just seemed like the logical, best place to locate the property to minimize the impact on her site. So basically, we followed the city's best management practices for the stormwater, and we feel that, we're going to enhance the situation over what's currently there.
And you even oversized it.
Yeah, it's 170% of the city's requirements. And there was a comment about how's water going to get to, this infiltration area that's uphill. And it's a simple thing. If you have a waterproof pipe and the outlet is lower than the inlet, water's going to flow into that infiltration thing. So the, comment about pumping and there's no way water's going to get in there is, not accurate. That,
Even though the pipe goes below the outlet, the inlet is higher. So
yeah,
it
the
can-
water levels out and it ends up in the pond. And we didn't go into detail on these plans because we were doing the basic minimum that we thought was required to, pull the permit and keep everybody happy. And
So is that inlet elevation and outlet elevation specified on the plans?
it's not specifically specified, no.
Okay.
And there is a note, there's or organization in town called the Sweetwater Collaborative
Okay.
that does a lot of drought-tolerant landscapes and rainwater management and rain gardens and stuff like that. And I have a note on the plans, and I'd encourage the clients to contact them, that ultimately them or somebody like them would design the system. We're just giving the basic concept.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. You addressed several of the concerns, it looks like, in your letter and your statement, but there's one that I don't see, and that is, after this work is complete, would there be the same, more, or less stormwater leaving the 417 property and going to the neighboring property?
Well, I would, the surface area of the site has not changed.
Right.
We've enhanced the infiltration aspects, so I would think there would be less.
Okay.
We're encouraging water to percolate down, and therefore, instead of just sheet flowing like it currently does, and so it should be less.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the issue is that the impervious surface, doesn't absorb any water, so the water sheet flows a lot faster off the property. But the intent of the rain gardens is to take that extra volume and percolate in soil, so you get the equivalent, as equivalent or better than just sheet flow off of a
Right.
bare property.
Where's the rain garden on here?
There's one up here, so this is the house. Samarkand Street's up there, this is the addition for the ADU. The rain garden's here, and the other infiltration pond was here.
Infiltration, what is that?
Just a basin that we filled up with mulch to basically provide a leaky swimming pool that would catch water that's flowing down the site and handles some of the roof drainage and just allows it to percolate down into the ground. And the comment that the mulch, is going to use up 70% of the capacity, if there's water in there, mulch floats, it will float out and be displaced. that it will, then we'll rake the mulch back if needed, that's not an issue, I don't think.
Well, I have a question. What will keep the mulch from floating here and floating into these people's property?
There is a fence along the rear property line and a dense hedge, I think it's a maintenance type issue, I think, not a,
Mr. Chair, I would like to add that the California Plumbing Code Appendix D sets the amount of rainfall that has to be managed. It actually quantifies it. It's very general. It doesn't even do it by county. It does it by region. When you do the calculations for this project at a impervious roof area of 813 square feet, you come up with 300 gallons per hour, and you were supposed to design the system in accordance with an hourly, a 1 hour storm at a 100-year storm for 60 minutes or for an hour. So what we're finding is that there are different criteria being used to design and evaluate systems. The Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program, which is where we're getting the requirement for basins, has a threshold and a design standard for the quantity of water you have to retain and treat. But the plumbing codes is much lower, and it's about capturing the water and discharging it adequately. So you will find discrepancies in the different designs that come before the board and before us based on those different standards. So it makes it difficult sometimes to look and analyze it when you have different standards that are being applied based on different permits and regulations.
So which standard takes precedence then?
Generally the most restrictive.
Okay.
But our enforcement ability as far as building and safety and the building official goes lie with the codes that were adopted, and we're charged with enforcing and you're charged with interpreting. So if there's a stormwater pollution prevention question, it might be appropriate for the board to ask for that question to be responded to by whoever you feel would be the best judge of that, whether it's someone in the city who administers that program or whether it's a qualified stormwater pollution developer, the QSD. But those are some options that I would suggest for the board.
Okay, I have a question. So reading the plumbing code, is this project in violation of the plumbing code?
No.
Okay. I'd like to make a couple of comments. So,
And I should add, not in our opinion.
okay, I'd like to make a couple of comments. So I did, I feel for the applicant. You want to have a safe home. It looks like, there's been flooding problems in the past, and so now a new development is a concern because, if it's increasing, water flow quantities, that would be a concern because it's going to aggravate the problem. I looked over the calculations, and there was a 543 cubic foot quantity calculated for one of the storm events, and that is for the total new impervious area. But then you need to subtract out what the previous value was for having it just be open land. And so 543 was the total for the impervious area, but when you calculate that, the additional area was about 193 cubic feet. So the additional volume of that is what would need to be taken care of to have an equivalent flow. So, and then as Patrick mentioned, the rain gardens are there to take this water and slow down that flow, percolate it in the soil. And so while it may not be designed for the full 193 cubic feet of water in a 24-hour storm event, in the time that it takes for it to percolate through the soil, and they're 170% oversized, the theory is that water is absorbed and mitigated, that additional water flow. So, and then also that this project, I think, fell under the Tier 2 requirements.
Right.
And so the added calculations that were presented by the applicant would be like if we would fall into a Tier 3 level, then we have to go through and do those calculations and it's a more involved process. So, but since the square footage of the addition is such that only Tier 2 was triggered, then the measurement of the soil for infiltration and the sizing of the rain gardens are adequate. And I guess the other question I have is, rain gardens, it does state, are for soil type other than D. So, but the filtration test was made. So is the filtration test allowed as an alternate to the soil type D?
Mr. Chair, I'm not prepared to answer the interpretive questions on the city's stormwater pollution prevention program. That's not under my authority, nor the authority of the Board of Appeals. So, and maybe I'll try to make my point again. So, what we're in charge of in the California Plumbing Code is rainwater capture and discharge safely, right? And this is the issue that's been brought up by the appellant, is their concern is that the rainwater is going to be discharged in a manner that is more hazardous than it is now. We apply the plumbing code to that, and all we're looking at is, are they capturing the right quantity of rainwater, the 100-year storm event for 60 minutes per the California Plumbing Code, and are they managing that water so that it doesn't discharge at that rate onto adjacent properties different than it historically has discharged onto those properties. So when we talk about stormwater pollution prevention, that's a whole other program not addressed to, it's not a flood mitigation program. It has no relationship to flood mitigation other than the fact that it's capturing and possibly detaining water and holding it for a while and changing that hydrograph so it smooths it out so it's not quite so sharp. But they are separate programs, and in no way is the city's stormwater pollution prevention program intended to be a floodplain management program. So when we mix calculations and hydrographs, we're kind of mixing apples and oranges. So I can tell you that we've done the calculations, and in our opinion, the plans demonstrate that they capture the rainfall required to be captured. I shouldn't even say captured. They address the rainfall amounts that are required to be addressed per the California Plumbing Code, Chapter 11, and Appendix D in the Plumbing Code. That's far less than what's required by the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program to be captured and treated. So there's a difference there. But our authority lies with the Plumbing Code and how it's being applied.
I have a question. Is there, because I can't see through the whole plans here, but is there some detail as to the construction of the rain garden and the drainage system so that when the city inspects this, they can say, yes, they built this in a method that will work in our opinion? Or are you just going to say, put in a rain garden and one guy goes out and throws some gravel around and puts a few succulents in and that's it? Or is it maybe the plan shows you dig down 2 feet and put gravel? I don't know what the rain garden construction process is.
Mr. Chair and board members, the state of California requires, as part of our stormwater pollution prevention discharge permit that we get from the Regional Water Quality Board as a city, has a lot of requirements, and it's a huge document. One of those requirements is that building and safety have a qualified stormwater practitioner certified by the state to do inspections of construction to make sure that they're constructed in accordance with the stormwater pollution prevention design made by the qualified stormwater developer as the plans were being approved. We have a person on staff who is a certified, qualified stormwater pollution practitioner. I tell you, it's not getting easier every year, I can tell you that. So in plan check, we require sufficient details that our practitioner can go out and look and confirm the systems are being installed the way they were designed.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right, next I have Jim.
I'll pass.
Marcia, you'll pass, and then Bruce. Bruce Caron.
I think hi, I'm Bruce. I'm one of the owners of the property. And one thing that I think Patrick was going to mention is that the deck is not impermeable. It's a permeable deck. So all of that surface area is not impermeable on the plan.
So was that part of this?
That was part of her calculations. And so I just want to add that. So let me just add a couple of points in a couple of minutes here that aren't in the city's plan and stuff that Patrick didn't mention. First, I want to say that my wife and I consider ourselves to be long-term Providence stewards of this property. What do I mean by long-term? In 1946, the property was a vacant lot. In December of 1946, the owner then moved a house from Lower Anacapa onto the property. And by April of 1947, our family had acquired an interest in the property. In the early 1980s, my wife and I moved in and raised our son there. And our son is now, he teaches 8th grade history locally. And so we know a lot about, how hard it is for early career people to get entry-level rental housing in the city of Santa Barbara. And when we looked at the plans and our architect, Patrick, said that this stormwater management plan would not only fulfill the city's requirement, but give an extra 70% of stormwater retention on the property. We thought, well, yeah, we can pay for that. And we're going to have these water gardens. Well, we hope to be here, maybe not us, but our family until, say, 2047. So we are a real estate agent's worst nightmare. We're never leaving. Now, in terms of stormwater management, I know we've had El Nino years, and we had, rain in our basement too. We're all on the same slope. There are 23 properties between Samarkand and Mission Creek, and probably only 15 of them are going to want to get ADUs. In the 26 years that Mary's lived next to us, she's never once come over and commented on water from our property disturbing her property. She's never complained. She's never done a conversation. Nothing until the week that we got the permit for the ADU. And then another thing happened that week is one of our other neighbors came over and said that Mary tried to recruit them to help her stop us from building our ADU. So I understand that stormwater is an issue in these big rain years. It's an issue all over town. And so we're upslope. We can't solve that, and the city can't somehow reverse the law of gravity. So we'll always be upslope. But I think we're doing a small project. We could have had it bigger. We don't want it bigger. We want to be here and help, the city and the neighborhood have, better people living in it. And I mean, like I say, I'm going to try to find an early professional and help them find a place to live. So I thank you for your time and your service, and I thank the city for all the guidance they gave us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bruce. All right, I believe that's the last person that has filled out a speaker slip. So
Yeah, well, come on up.
yes, please come on up.
The question that I have for you now is what the analysis that I showed you from Dale Weber, who's clearly qualified to make such an analysis, and the county and the city documents that indicate the soil type for our area, do you agree that my analysis is valid in terms of impact? I'm not talking about the minimum requirements for development. I'm talking about what's going to happen to me and my family. You don't have to answer. The fact that you're not answering indicates to me that you are in a quandary about that. Okay.
I got a question.
Yeah.
You've been having this problem for a long time.
Yes.
Why haven't you complained about it?
I'll tell you why. Because when I first bought that property, I was 26 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. I just started working at Deloitte. I wanted to get out of Los Angeles because of the Rodney King riots, which affected me greatly. So I moved to the area, and my perception of a neighborhood coming from LA, coming from the environment that I was in, was doors are open and neighbors are neighbors, and you don't complain. I never wanted to be a complainer. Being here in front of you today and stating my case in the way that I have had to do is an act of, it's not in my nature. Okay? So when we talk about young people starting out and the trials and tribulations of being able to buy a house, pay a mortgage, that was me at 26, 27 years old. And it was me at 28, 29 years old fighting a battle of mold, water, mud, mushrooms, picking mushrooms with no funds to fix it. No understanding, no background to be able to get a grasp of what was happening to us, to me. And I put everything I had into that house. So we lived through it, and we figured it out, but on our own, because that's what we do at our house. We don't complain about our neighbors to our neighbors. That's not my nature. I want to get along. I want a good outcome. I want a happy neighborhood. If the fence needs to be built and somebody doesn't want to build it, then if I have the funds, I'll build it. Because I'm invested just like Bruce is in the neighborhood. So that's why I haven't complained. And if you've been through a major flood, which maybe some of you have, the last thing in the world you're thinking about is taking a picture of what's happening. Because I'll tell you what it's like. The water is rising fast. This example will be January of 2017. We had over 5 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. It happened in the middle of the day. My husband was at work. We just purchased a new mobile pump so that if we had a situation in a specific area, we could drop the pump and pump it out. We'd already checked with the planning division to see if it was okay. If we were in a crisis situation, if we pumped water out to the street, and he said, if you are in peril, you can. We've done our best through these years to be good neighbors, to be responsible, to be non-complaining. But the situation in front of us right now is dire. We have put in French drains along the property line. We have dropped drainage basins so that we could collect the water and take it out underneath the driveway and out through the back where FEMA told us the natural water drainage was planned. And out the back means in the back of all these properties is a certain area that turns into a raging creek in high rain. And if that creek backs up, or if the water overflows our pumps, our filtration basins, then that water goes into our basement, underneath our house. Water underneath a house creates mud. And that mud does not dry up because it's underneath a house. This requires the placement of fans and possibly months to dry out. And in that time that mud is wet, it's creating serious adverse effects for my children, for me, for our property. And so we have done all these things over the years as we have found funding to handle it on our own, as good neighbors would. When Bruce said he has no idea that we have these issues, up until now, that is simply not a true statement. I feel uncomfortable calling that out, but he arrived on my property with plumbers and all kinds of people last March when we had another significant rainfall event, and asked to come onto my property to try to find out if there was some kind of a sanitation clearing location or something. And I invited them onto our property, even knowing that the rain was coming. And at that time, I showed him where the rain goes. And I told him, I said, I've got like 15, 20 minutes for you. And after that, it's every man for himself. So in March of this year, before the permit was appealed, he knew darn well we've had problems. Not only that, but he also knew about the flooding during El Nino. And I think Bruce is a good person. In fact, I think Tinka and Bruce are both good people. But there's no way they could understand, or you maybe could understand, outside of what I've just showed you, which is third-party information documented by the city, the county, and a qualified civil engineer that worked for the county. And so if what this comes down to is the minimum that you can do for me and my family, the bare minimum that you can do for us, then I'm sad, especially after what happened in Montecito. So if you people are about safety, and you are on the cusp of approving a ton of buildings in Santa Barbara that is filled with little hills and people that could be damaged, and you refuse to look at this plumbing code, and you refuse to take a look at the actual outcomes for people, then I'm sad. And I have not gotten up here and said, yeah, we've got a rain garden that we think will do the job with no specifications whatsoever. I put my hard-earned money and my time in getting qualified people to present to you the issues at hand. And these issues are for me, but they're not just for me, are they? They're for everybody. And if you don't pay attention to what happened in Montecito, and you let this stuff just go by on the very bare minimum, even with the actual facts facing you right here in the face with qualified people and independent documents, then I'm sad. I'm sad for you, and I'm sad for the people that live here. If I'd gotten up here and just given you some off-the-cuff presentation, then I would feel I have no right to put you on notice here. But I do feel I have a right. I think I presented qualified, detailed, thoughtful, very thoughtful information to you to consider. And I really hope that you will consider the outcome of this and not do the very bare minimum you can do. And instead, keep us safe. Keep my family safe. Keep other families safe. But right here, right now, after 26 years, I'm stating my case. I'm stating it for the record. I'm showing you independent evidence of the flood problems that we've had. I've contacted FEMA for documentation regarding their input into our 20-some-odd years ago. And I am prepared to support what happens to me and my family as a result of your decisions in this case. And I know we all have jobs to do. And if it wasn't for Lonnie, I wouldn't even be here today. I found out more about property rights from the city of Santa Barbara and more about due process in this situation. And to this date, until this right now, I've been so encouraged that I actually felt you all were here to help us. But if you let this go through, in my view, given the very good documentation that I provided, then you're not the people I thought you were. You're not about safety. You're about the bare minimum you could do to let it ride and get it done. And if that's who you want to be, fine. I'm sad for you. That's it.
I guess I'll go first. First of all, Ms. Auchincloss, I feel for you. However, it would have been nice to talk to Dale Weber and have him so we could ask him some questions, but I did some calculations, and as I mentioned before, the 543 cubic feet of runoff is actually 2.5 times what the actual runoff is, because that 100
Mr. Chair, for the matter of record, you may want to close public comment, or close the comment and
Okay.
make this a board deliberation period, and then that way you can express your
All right.
concerns without having rebuttal.
Okay. So I'd like to close the public comment period, and we have a standing motion to uphold the decision of the chief building official. So are there any questions from the board to the appellant? Are there any questions from the board to the staff? So I have a question. So and I think you've answered this already, but there's in the presentation by the appellant, there are several comments significantly aggravating drainage and flooding issues. This project's further aggravating drainage issues, making them increasingly unmanageable. And I believe you mentioned that that the proper steps have been taken and that this isn't the case.
Mr. Chair and board members, and also the appellant, I think it's important that we recognize the reality of the situation that we have before us. The state of California adopts standards. They deliberately adopt minimum standards, whether we like minimum standards or not. That's what they adopt, and they impose them on us, and we shall enforce them, or they will bring action against us. So we do enforce those. We adopt those regulations, and we enforce them. And we are bound to enforce them at the bare minimum level. We cannot hold someone to a standard higher than the standard published in the regulations. This particular, and we know that can result cumulatively, when you look at all the different standards, it can result in situations that don't make good practical sense sometimes. I don't think this is one of those, but it can result in that occasionally. This particular project has three aspects to it. It has a history of, the area has a history of flooding. Okay, the application for an accessory dwelling unit is not going to change whether or not this area floods. This area has a flood problem. And there's a surface water management requirement in the plumbing code. We've confirmed the minimum compliance with that. Is that an assurance that everybody in the neighborhood is going to be safe? Absolutely not. I will tell you that that is not what that minimum standard is intended to do. It's intended to provide a level of safety that the state of California feels is acceptable, but it will not protect everybody. They do publish the standards. They do debate the standards when they adopt those codes. So there is discussion. It's not in a dark room, but they also recognize it's not going to solve everybody's problem. So again, we enforce that minimum standard in the plumbing code. I can tell you that we've confirmed that. This actually goes beyond the minimum standard. The Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program, another state mandated program intended to help keep our stormwater clean, our creeks and oceans clean, and rivers clean. Great program from a conceptual standpoint. It is a minimum standard program. Will it keep the ocean, the creeks, and the rivers clean? I guarantee you it will not. There will still be debris, dirt, trash, and pollutants in our creeks and our rivers and our oceans, but there will be less. And it will be set at a reasonable level according to the state when they publish their standard. This project, in our opinion, meets all of the regulations that are required according to FEMA for floodplain management, for the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program adopted by the city and approved by the State of California Regional Water Quality Board, and Title 24, the California Building Standards, including the plumbing code.
All right. Thank you, Chief Building Official. Are there any more questions from the board to the staff? Okay, it is now time for the board to discuss the standing motion. No discussion? Okay, John?
Sure. So as I understand it, our job is to review the decision that was made by the building department. And if we feel there's an aspect of the code that they didn't see, or if we disagree that they made a bad decision, or we disagree with their decision and feel that they made a bad decision, they weren't interpreting the code correctly, then we would have grounds to not uphold the standing motion. But if we don't see anything in the documents that we have, in the information we've been given, that shows us that the building department hasn't overlooked anything or hasn't made a decision or didn't have some information that they now have that would change their decision, it's our decision typically, or we would look at upholding the decision of the building department. Is that correct? I mean, our scope isn't to say we need to find a solution to a flooding problem in a neighborhood. That's beyond the scope of our committee. We're looking at the decision that was made by the building department, correct?
That sounds.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just
Yeah,
wanted to,
yeah.
all right, that's clear to me.
Okay, so, anybody, any other board members have any comments or discussions?
Nope.
All right, so we're going to call to a vote. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the standing motion is the uphold the decision of the chief building official for all appeals. That's the first motion that has to be disposed of. So the vote would be yea or nay upon that.
Okay, so we're, do I need to state that motion again?
I just did, but you can say as stated if you'd like.
Okay, so we have a motion to uphold the decision of the building official and building department for the permit issuance of 417 Samarkand Drive. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed?
Well, I'm going to say aye, but I'm really sorry I have to.
Right. Okay, so the motion carries.
Mr. Chair, can we ask Board Member Wood, was that an aye for in favor of the motion or an aye against the motion?
Aye in favor of the motion.
Thank you.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, so we have the next item is going to be 105 Chapala Street. And we have an update from the building official and club manager on accessible path of travel requirement.
Mr. Chair, may we take a 5-minute recess where we want to get Board Member Coots into the room here, and
Yeah,
he's
'cause
in the
if I
lobby, I think.
leave, you don't have a quorum, do you?
3's a quorum, but we do want to have Board Member Coots, and he's here. He's just waiting for this item to be over, and then,
Oh, okay.
so we could just take a 5-minute
Shall I
break.
state why I should be recused right
Yeah,
now?
you can do that if you like.
Okay, I'm
Board
going to
Member
be
Wood.
recused from this item because I am a member of the Santa Barbara Club and would have an interest in the decision.
One of the owners.
I wish. Oh, here's Mr.
I have done work at this project, but I'm not at this project. I've done work at this address in the
Yeah.
past, but I'm not involved in this project.
I would just disclose that, yeah, that you've had a business relationship with him, but you don't think that that'll interfere with your.
I do. I've done several homes and ADUs and stuff like that. Not this one.
I felt for both applicants, but the resolution was to uphold the building official.
It's only about a dozen times since we sent that. out. But not just here. Santa Barbara's minimal compared to everywhere else. No. 6 months. I was naive. 2 years ago when I first got called to look at getting out for 10 pieces of equipment, piece of service, well, you got an 800. What do you mean you want 4,000? Grow lights.
Good job, Lonnie.
She's upset. Can't blame her. She put a lot of time and money into it.
Okay, we'd like to continue with 105 Chapala Street. An update from the building chief building official and club manager on the accessible path of travel requirement. And with us, we have Nick Kuntz that just joined us, and then Vincent Wood stepped out and and recused himself from this item. So staff, would you please present and advise of the standing motion?
I'd like to make a statement first. I've done work professionally at this address in the past. I'm not involved in the current project. I just wanted to state that for the record.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sitting next to me is Elizabeth Sorgman. She's a certified access specialist, one of our CASPs, and a licensed architect in the state of California. She's also, we're fortunate to have her as a plans examiner for us. So Elizabeth is here to answer any accessibility questions that might come up. However, I do need to say, I'm not anticipating a lot of questions because this is just an update to give you an idea of where we left off last time and where we're at now, from our August hearing to now what's transpired. And Addison is here to represent and answer questions from the Santa Barbara Club if there are questions from the board, but unless he changed his mind, I don't think he's prepared anything formally to pass along. So I'd like to give the board an update. What we did...
Real quick, I just want to disclose that just before this meeting, I ran into Mr. Railing in the lobby, and he was looking at plans for this, and I looked at them too, but we did not discuss merit or substance.
So noted, thank you. Thank you, Nick.
So, Mr. Chair and board members, after the last hearing, I met with 3 of the Santa Barbara Club members, one of which was Addison out at the site, and we looked at the approved plans and the site itself to see what opportunities were available and to make sure that the access compliance forms that had been discussed but not presented at the last hearing were accurate. In the course of that site meeting, we observed that I kind of chuckle just because of sometimes in the speed of doing plan check and corrections, things like this happen. So there is an existing enclosure for the trash, and the enclosure is a hedge with a gate, which does not require a building permit and has been there for, I don't know, it was probably a 6-inch trunk on each one of the hedge plants, so it's been there for a while. The design professional who prepared the plans, when the question was asked during plan check, thought that the correction that was given to him directed him to draw a new enclosure. So he drew a new enclosure around the trash area, but that's not a requirement. So that one component of the design changes the access compliance forms because now the trash enclosure area is not an area of alteration. It's an area that doesn't even have to be addressed via a building permit. So that dollar amount drops off of the path of travel improvement forms, access compliance forms, and it changes the cost of the overall project as well. So with that said, what we're trying to work through now is reestablish what is the baseline, kind of the least requirements, the minimum compliance that's required based on the project that's being proposed that will now not include a trash enclosure. I was hoping to have something more to give to the board. Last Wednesday and Thursday, I was exchanging emails with the Environmental Services Division of the city who enforces the enclosures around trash collection devices and receptacles. And after Thursday, August 30th in the afternoon, I didn't get replies back, so I don't have anything more to offer. But I was hoping to get to the point to be able to sit down with the Santa Barbara Club and a site plan and say this is what the city is going to be looking at and approving. But we're not there yet. So I hope to be there sometime next week. Hopefully we'll hear back from Environmental Services today or tomorrow, and we'll be able to move forward with that. So I anticipate that should that happen, this item will either not come back to the board because they will meet all the minimum code requirements for accessibility and they'll have documented them in their access compliance forms, or if we still have a dispute over how we're interpreting the code, then the item would come back to the board as an appeal. I don't think it'll come back as an unreasonable hardship because the dollar amount now that's going to be spent on the project will not exceed the state threshold, and it will not trip them into or give them the opportunity to do an unreasonable hardship. They'll be limited to the 20% compliant factor for projects that are under that threshold. And I think that, Addison, was there anything else that we discussed? Okay. So that's my update on that item. If there are specific questions or concerns, I'm willing to hear them, but there's no decision necessary from the board.
All right, thank you, Chief Building Official. And would the appellant please present your request?
Request.
Okay. Okay, so we're just going to open to public comment? Okay, so we'll now open to public comment. Due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. I have Jim.
I'll pass, thank you.
Marsotto, and then I also have Will Railing. Thank you, Will. Stopwatch.
Hi, Will Railing. Really glad to hear this is getting resolved, it looks like, and I think it's for the best when Mr. Stuffler is able to work out a code-based decision. In preparing for this in case, I did listen to the recording from the previous meeting. I thought it was a great presentation by the applicant, one of the best I've heard, and going through various factors, looking at the plans, which I did on my own. The path of travel from the street that's in the current building permit, I just want to say, is really great. It's really great if that ends up getting done. I noted on the access compliance form that another inaccessible concern in the building are the bathrooms. And again, I appreciate that under the threshold, the limit's going to be 20%, and there's only so much you can do in that. So I'm going to very quickly run through some documents that I submitted from the record. I find the issue of a club being technically private, and there was a lot of discussion about that at the last hearing, and that's what prompted me to do a little research, is a really interesting one in accessibility. And I want to submit some documents for future reference to argue that a club like this, while it might be technically a private club, is in the business of being a public accommodation in terms of a wedding and event facility. So I'm going to very quickly walk through these. I've given the applicant a courtesy copy and submitted one for the record. The first 3 documents are excerpts from the last tax returns 2014, 2015, 2016 for the club. These are public record because they're a nonprofit organization. And each of these, I've just highlighted 2 numbers. One is the gross receipts for public use of club facilities. That's the key phrase, public use of club facilities. And the second for each tax return is the portion of their net income from sales of inventory that comes from unrelated business revenue. That's revenue that's unrelated to their mission. So these are all numbers that the IRS gives guidance on what you're supposed to put there. But in each of those 2 numbers for each of these 3 years, it's a really substantial amount of revenue, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from their business of providing a public accommodation of weddings and events. The next page is from the club website, their events and weddings advertising. It speaks for itself. There's a link on the bottom left that says, well, you see it as text that says, read more testimonials here. If you click through, you get to the next document where it says 8 Santa Barbara Club reviews. And these are reviews from 8 different people that held their wedding at the club. And again, I think it speaks for itself. So it is a great wedding venue. It's advertised to the public. It's getting something close to half of its, or a third to half of its revenue from these activities. And I'd like to argue, and that may put upon them more of an accessibility obligation than they realize. Last page is the most important page, something I hope each of you will hang on to. It's the 2016 code definition of equivalent facilitation. I've underlined some things. Mr. Stuffler reminded the board last time that really equivalent facilitation is what it's about. And a lot of your decisions involve deciding what's equivalent facilitation. So I just will close by saying that it's really important to study this definition and bear it in mind in the future and really scrutinize it. And when you're asked to approve something that involves equivalent facilitation, really make sure that you're satisfied that you're meeting these elements. Thank you very much. Great job by everybody on this item, including the applicant, and thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Will. I guess we'll now close the public comment. And are we ready for adjournment?
That's at the pleasure of the board, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
looks like we're ready for adjournment. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I'll second it.
Let's second it. Okay, call to vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion carries. We're adjourned.